Hey guys, tonight we travel way back before duct tape, before spirit levels, even before home warranties to follow the least chill god in the Greek pantheon as he tries to pivot into a mortal career. Welcome to the slow-burning saga of Hephaestus, god of fire, forge, and fantastically impractical architectural plans. Picture this: the divine job fair is being held in a half-collapsed marble atrium that smells like roasted olives and godly disappointment. You trudge past Poseidon's overflowing sea salt humidifier booth and Athena's war strategy for kids tent, and there he is, Hephaestus. He's hunched over a folding table that groans under the weight of forged blueprints, steaming rivets, and what might be a still smoldering model volcano. His tunic is stained with soot. His eyebrows are lightly singed, and his left sandal is held together with what looks suspiciously like bronze wire. You already know he doesn't belong here, but also, he kind of does. You watch as he slams down a scroll labeled multi-zone heating using basilisk core friction, and proceeds to pitch it to a mortal peasant who just wanted to ask where the toilets were. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to comment your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trail behind Hephaestus as he storms out of the event, muttering about being too practical for Olympus. Honestly, he might be right. Unlike the other gods who mostly spend their time transforming into swans or starting multi-generational family curses, Hephaestus likes making things, real, usable things. But when you're the god of craftsmanship in a society that defines divinity by chaos and sparkles, you're basically the guy at the rave trying to pass out IKEA hex keys. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus was originally worshipped as a god of volcanoes or simply co-opted later by metalworking cults. What's less debated is that his origin story is a bit tragic. Thrown off Olympus by Hera or maybe Zeus, depending on which ancient gossip scroll you trust, Hephaestus fell for an entire day before splashing into the sea like a flaming meteor. Sea nymphs raised him, which sounds sweet, until you remember they probably gave him kelp for breakfast and sang in confusing riddles. Even now, limping slightly and trailing sparks, Hephaestus doesn't quite fit in with the golden-haired perfection of the other gods. He's all elbow grease and burned knuckles, which makes his new idea getting a job fixing mortal homes feel weirdly heartwarming or wildly doomed. The thing is, he's actually prepared. You sneak a peek at his schematics. Chimneys that double as constellation projectors, banisters made of interlocking serpents that whisper house rules to guests, and self-stirring cauldrons that honestly seem like they'd unionize if left alone too long. His first potential client, a dusty village elder whose house is tilting like a drunk solder. The man squints at Hephaestus's forge calluses and says, "You do carpentry." And Hephaestus, without missing a beat, says, "Better. I do miracles with a nail gun made of lightning." There's a moment of stunned silence. Then the elder shrugs and points toward the hills. You follow Hephaestus as he sets off, dragging a cart full of anvils, enchanted hammers, and a jar of what he claims is emergency Cyclopes glue. He waves off directions, muttering that he's already reverse-mapped the terrain using bird shadows and seismic echoes. You pretend to understand. Along the road, he pauses to admire a poorly built wooden shed. "See that?" he says, crouching beside it. "That crossbeam's carrying resentment. It hates the nails. That's emotional rot." You nod slowly. Somewhere, an owl hoots in skeptical agreement. By nightfall, Hephaestus has built a tiny forge from river rocks, started a small fire with thunderclap flint, and repurposed a broken amphora into a bellows. It's all deeply unnecessary and deeply impressive. He doesn't sleep, of course. He just polishes a wrench and hums to himself in a rhythm only Cyclopes understand. You lie back and stare at the stars, wondering if anyone's ever asked a god to fix their roof without first sacrificing a goat. Probably not. But something tells you Hephaestus is about to make a name for himself. Maybe not a big one. Maybe just etched in the back wall of a rebuilt shepherd's hut, glowing faintly with ancient pride. Still, you know enough to be wary. Gods don't usually show up for home repairs without turning your laundry pile into a myth. And yet, as the fire crackles and Hephaestus hums a lullaby made of molten iron and whistling air ducts, you feel the first stirrings of something strange. The hope that maybe, just maybe, Olympus's weirdest god is about to change the world, one over-engineered doorknob at a time. Morning arrives with the sound of metal on stone, sharp, rhythmic, and vaguely threatening. You blink into the dusty light and find Hephaestus already knee-deep in renovation plans, shouting at a rock wall like it just insulted his mother. Which, honestly, it might have. Greek stones are notoriously judgmental. The village elder arrives on a creaky donkey and stares at the half-finished forge now occupying his courtyard. I asked for repairs, not a minor eruption. He says. Hephaestus hands him a chunk of obsidian shaped into a plumbing valve and says, "You're welcome." It doesn't go over great. You learn quickly that Hephaestus has a problem with authority, especially divine authority. Zeus, for instance, once refused to let him install a fireproof drainage system beneath Olympus, calling it a tripping hazard for peacocks. Hera, she filed a divine restraining order after he replaced her temple candles with flameless heat orbs that sang lullabies in Dorian mode. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus was ever truly accepted back on Olympus after his first exile, or if he simply worked there part-time like a disgruntled contractor with divine visitation rights. Either way, he didn't stay. Not long. Too many egos, he mutters as you help him dig a trench for anti-flood charms. Athena kept trying to optimize my schematics. Eris burned them to roast a boar. So why not start fresh? You ask. Hephaestus sighs. Because mortals are just as bad. They want magic cabinets and floating bathtubs but complain about the humming noise. He slaps a rune into place and the trench begins to glow faintly. Besides, have you ever tried explaining reinforced tension beams to a shepherd? Fair point. You follow him into the next town, this one a little larger, a little louder. There's a sign for a local festival, midsummer, meatball and snake toss. Hephaestus looks intrigued. I could build them a better trebuchet. Instead, he wanders over to the market, where the local blacksmith is selling dented horseshoes and blunt sickles. Hephaestus picks one up, turns it over, and winces. This poor thing died in vain, he murmurs, then proceeds to recast it on the spot using a pocket crucible and a piece of the sun. Literally, a tiny flicker of solar flame. You're not sure the town's ready for him. Neither is Olympus. To be fair, the gods are terrible at hiring. Their HR department, probably an overworked minor deity named Formularius, is infamous for losing scrolls, misfiling prayers, and promoting whoever shouts loudest during divine meetings. Back when Hephaestus tried to go legit, he submitted a divine resume. Skills included thermal alchemy, smart anvil calibration, fistfights with lava. He got no response. Meanwhile, Dionysus got appointed god of social coordination after inventing karaoke. So Hephaestus turned to mortals. It's not that he needs the work, it's that he wants it. A forge without purpose is just a hot hole in the ground, and he, more than any other god, craves the making, the act of shaping something useful, beautiful, or weirdly both. Like now, he's installing a chimney system in a baker's hut. The baker requested less smoke, more warmth. Hephaestus responds by building a spiraling copper duct that doubles as a bread warmer and produces faint lullaby notes when bread is sufficiently risen. The baker weeps softly and gives him a meat pie. Later, at the edge of town, you sit with him beneath a twisted olive tree. His hands are still smudged with soot, his eyes glowing faintly like the last ember in a fire. You ask if he misses Olympus. Sometimes, he says, mostly the altitude, good for forging. Then he pauses, and the goats, the divine ones, smell less. You both laugh. Then a pause. What's the hardest part? You ask. Hephaestus leans back, convincing people I'm not here to ruin anything. That I don't want to set their roof on fire, or turn their dog into bronze. That I can help. You don't say anything, you just nod. Because you've seen the hesitation in villagers' eyes, the way they glance at his limp and assume fragility, or worse, madness, you've heard the whispers. Isn't he the one who built the chains that bound Prometheus? Didn't he forge the throne that trapped Hera? He has a reputation, sure, but the truth. He just builds what's asked. The problem is, gods don't ask, they demand. Mortals beg. Neither group reads the blueprints. So here he is, fixing what he can, improvising with what he can't, and trying, against all divine odds, to be useful in a world that's not sure it needs him. Above you, the stars begin to prick the sky like tiny rivets. A cool breeze carries the scent of charcoal, lavender, and very faintly, freshly fired clay. You curl up against the tree, listening as Hephaestus hums softly a tune you don't recognize but somehow feel you've always known. Maybe it's an ancient lullaby for blacksmiths. Maybe it's just the sound fire makes when it rests. Either way, you're warm, safe, and drifting. By the next sunrise, you and Hephaestus are hiking a steep trail up Mount Pelion, where a centaur's home is reportedly in dire need of repairs. The job came through what Hephaestus calls my mythical Yelp network, basically gossip among dryads, which is somehow faster than a Hermes Express scroll. The path smells of pine and sunburned moss. Your legs ache. Hephaestus doesn't notice. He's too busy hauling his tool pack, which clangs with each step like an angry temple bell. You try not to think about the fact that at least 3 of the hammers are whispering. Eventually, you arrive at a half-hidden cave carved into the rock, smoke curling lazily from a crude chimney that appears to be made of stacked helmets. Out front stands Chiron, the famously wise, famously patient centaur looking less like a mentor of heroes and more like a contractor waiting on permits. Finally, Chiron mutters, "Every time it rains, the ceiling weeps louder than Orpheus." Hephaestus gives a small, respectful nod. "Water damage is the silent destroyer of architecture," he says, already unpacking what appears to be a compass fused with a lightning rod. You step inside the cave and nearly sneeze from the smell of wet goat hair, crushed herbs, and moldy scrolls. The place is a mess of contradictions, shelves stacked with ancient medicines, next to what looks like a bow tie collection, a library carved into the stone wall, and a floor that tilts like a boat in a storm. You're not sure whether to be impressed or mildly cursed. Hephaestus surveys the cave like a battlefield, ceilings sagging due to ancient emotional trauma. He says, also, improper weight distribution. He points to a boulder that seems to be holding up the roof with sheer stubbornness. That rock is lying about its load-bearing status. Can you fix it? Chiron asks, hopeful but wary. Oh, absolutely. Hephaestus says, but it's going to involve lightning anchors, rune plaster, and probably a small volcanic vent. Why does everything involve a volcanic vent? You whisper, because they're efficient. He whispers back, and dramatic, while Chiron prepares tea made from boiled mint and something that might be owl tears. Hephaestus gets to work, sparks fly, dust rains down. At one point, a salamander bursts out of the wall, hissing a folk song. You duck. Hephaestus offers it a job as a heat sensor. Here's the thing. Centaur architecture is notoriously chaotic. They need high ceilings, reinforced flooring, and stable walls that can handle hooves. Also, their kitchens are weirdly over-designed, possibly due to their obsession with tea-based rituals. Historians still argue whether centaurs invented the first spice rack or just tripped into culinary fame while avoiding battle. And yet, the fringe detail you don't expect. Chiron has a hidden meditation alcove behind a curtain of ivy, complete with scented candles and a single harp. Hephaestus accidentally triggers a harp solo by leaning on the wrong vine. It plays green sleeves. No one knows why. As repairs continue, the cave transforms. Hephaestus lifts the ceiling 6 inches with enchanted pulleys, installs a skylight that filters moonlight but blocks Pegasus dander, and reinforces the walls with basalt mosaic tiles that shimmer when touched by hooves. The result? Stunning, slightly ominous, deeply uninsurable. Chiron is impressed. This might actually survive the next hero training camp. Hephaestus grins. That's the idea. But not everyone's pleased. A local nymph named Bristle appears at the entrance, arms crossed, brows furrowed. You're disrupting the mountain's flow, she declares. The moss is angry. Hephaestus, very gently, hands her a vial of bioluminescent spores. These should pacify the moss. She huffs, but takes it. You sip tea and try not to stare, as Hephaestus fine-tunes the fireplace to project calming constellations so students can relax after dodging harpy talons. He hums while working, the melody slow and strange, like the forge itself is singing through him. Why do you care so much? You ask him later, watching him polish the final stone. He pauses. Because I can't unsee what's broken, and because I know what it feels like to live in a place that doesn't quite fit. You get it. You really do. He's not just fixing homes. He's building belonging. For creatures, gods, mortals, whoever needs it, even if they don't ask nicely, even if they don't ask at all. You leave Mount Pelion at sunset, the sky a bruise of lavender and rust. Chiron waves from the doorway, standing tall beneath a roof that finally stays quiet when the wind howls. Hephaestus walks beside you in silence, until he says, I gave the cave a whisper vent. It sings, welcome home, if you enter during a thunderstorm. Won't that scare people? Hopefully, a god's idea of kindness, you suppose, is always a little terrifying. You're barely halfway down the mountain when the next scroll arrives, fluttering through the air like a mildly irritated bird and landing square on Hephaestus's shoulder. It unfurls with a dramatic little snap, revealing florid handwriting and far too many glitter stickers for a message from the divine realm. Urgent. Hephaestus mutters, nymph grotto lighting consultation, requesting ambiance with a side of shimmer. He groans. They want me to invent mood lighting. You try not to laugh. Nymphs are notoriously picky, especially when it comes to interior aesthetics. Their idea of a light source tends to be a beam of filtered moonlight striking a dew-laced tulip at exactly 3:17 a.m. By afternoon, you arrive at a secluded glen where the trees form a natural cathedral. Mist swirls at ankle level. Everything glows faintly in that suspicious way that says, we enchant visitors for sport. A sign reads, Dryad Spa and Grotto, no mortals without leaves. Hephaestus, clearly prepared, dons a headband woven from pine needles. You just carry a fern. Inside, the grotto is stunning. Crystalline walls shimmer with trapped droplets, and water trickles down bioluminescent roots. But the lighting, let's just say if you've ever tried to meditate inside a jellyfish rave, you've got the general idea. We're going for something more serene, says a nymph with a name that sounds like a sneeze in slow motion. Right now, it screams Poseidon's bachelor party. Hephaestus, to his credit, nods seriously. What's the lumen threshold you're targeting? Something between ethereal glow and mild hallucination. They all blink at him. So, he starts sketching. You peek over his shoulder and see plans for a light system powered by algae, quartz prisms, and what he calls will-o'-the-wisp diffusion spheres. It looks beautiful and incredibly impractical. Historians still argue whether the Greeks used natural phosphorescence in ritual spaces, he murmurs, adjusting his tool belt. Personally, I think they just threw shiny rocks at the problem and called it sacred. Within an hour, the grotto transforms. Soft lavender lights bloom from the walls. Pools glisten with pale gold, their surface undisturbed. The ceiling pulses faintly with a ripple effect that mimics starlight on calm water. It's quiet, soothing almost enough to make you forget that one of the lily pads just winked. Then Hephaestus adds his final touch. Floating lanterns shaped like drifting leaves, powered by heat captured from underwater geysers. They follow visitors slowly, gently, humming lullabies composed by singing mushrooms. Is it too much? He asks you. It's aggressively peaceful. You reply, the nymphs are thrilled until one discovers her reflection isn't flattering in the lantern light. Do these cast emotional shadows? She asks, horrified. Only if you have emotional baggage. Hephaestus replies flatly, without looking up. You swear a few of the lanterns dim themselves out of sheer discomfort. The job's mostly done. But one final tweak leads to chaos. A nymph accidentally bumps a prism, redirecting a beam of light onto an ancient shell embedded in the wall. It glows red, then screams. Turns out, it was a trapped siren. Just one. Very bored, very loud. The cave floods with sound high-pitched, furious, and deeply off-key. Water ripples. Crystals hum. Somewhere, your fern disintegrates in fear. Hephaestus sighs, calmly flips a switch on his shoulder-mounted lantern, and the siren gets zapped back into silence with a puff of lavender smoke. He adjusts a dial and mutters, "Note to self, install scream dampeners." Later, as you sit on a quartz bench eating moss pastries, don't ask. Hephaestus stares into the glowing pool. You'd think, he murmurs, that people would be grateful when you improve their space, but they only notice what goes wrong. You nudge his arm. That's true of everyone who builds things. It's never about the 20 perfect arches. It's about the one cursed doorknob. He chuckles. I once forged a doorknob that whispered compliments. Useful. Not really. It kept getting jealous of the knocker. As the grotto lights pulse softly around you, you start to feel odd, relaxed. The kind of sleepy that feels like gravity is gently kneading your shoulders. You close your eyes for just a second and hear faint humming, not mechanical, but natural. Plant-based lullabies, dreamy photosynthesis. You wonder if the light is doing it to you. Or maybe it's just the presence of a god who, against all odds, actually listens to what people want, then makes it better, even if they don't say thank you. The next commission arrives on a chariot pigeon, not pulled by a pigeon made of pigeon. Feathers, beak, wheels. You're not even going to ask. Hephaestus just squints at it and mutters, "A Corinthian noble." Of course, you head to the outskirts of the city where a towering villa perches like a smug goat on a cliff. It has columns for days, imported marble walkways, and a fountain shaped like Poseidon shaking hands with himself. There's even a hedge maze, which Hephaestus claims is a fantastic place to misplace moral compasses. The noble greets you in a silk robe that is regrettably transparent in certain lighting. "Ah, the artisan," he exclaims. "We require a tasteful centerpiece. Perhaps a water feature, or something with mythological gravitas, something petrifying." You blink. Hephaestus asks, "You mean impressive?" "Oh no," the noble says. "I mean actually petrifying. I want something that stops guests in their tracks." A long pause. "Medusa head," the noble says with a wink. "But chic." Hephaestus does not sigh, but you feel him internally scream. "You're aware," he says slowly, "that direct contact with a Gorgon's gaze causes irreversible stonification." "Oh, I don't plan on looking at it." The noble sniffs. "That's what curtains are for." You both stare at him. He gestures grandly toward the atrium. "Install it near the cheese table." The next few hours are deeply unsettling. Hephaestus sends for a replica thankfully and crafts a facsimile Medusa bust from marble, obsidian, and a handful of enchanted snake scales. It glowers impressively. Occasionally the hair moves. Historians still argue whether early Corinthian nobles used monster relics as status symbols or just had really bad taste. Hephaestus murmurs while adjusting the bust's jaw angle. "I suspect both." The installation goes smoothly. The pedestal rotates. Slowly, ominously, guests arrive and nervously avoid eye contact with the appetizer spread. Hephaestus installs a mirrored ceiling to deflect disaster, but you suspect it's mostly to amuse himself. That night, disaster strikes. A drunken cousin named Philo leans too far over the olive platter and locks eyes with the bust. There's a flash of light, a sharp ping, then silence. Philo is now a tasteful statue holding a fig. Everyone screams. One guest faints into the hummus. The noble is oddly thrilled. "Oh, it's perfect," he cries. "Can you freeze a few more of my relatives?" Hephaestus looks like he might walk into the sea. You help him drag the bust out at midnight, wrapping it in goat hair blankets and muttering prayers to Hermes that no one files a complaint. Out behind the villa, Hephaestus mutters something in Old Olympian and dissolves the statue with a touch of his palm. Temporary curse. He explains. Philo will wake up in a week, probably covered in cheese. You sit in the garden, watching moths spiral through moonlight, while the god of forge and frustration carves a new safety plaque for his next installation. It reads, "Do not stare into mythological consequences. That noble is going to write a terrible review." You say, "I'll respond with a diagram." Hephaestus replies, "Nothing enrages aristocrats more than diagrams." You laugh. He doesn't. Instead, he stares at his soot-covered hands. "It's always the same," he says softly. "I give them something powerful, beautiful, and they immediately try to weaponize it. Maybe they don't know what else to do. You offer. Maybe they've never been given something just to enjoy." He looks at you. "I don't build for war. Not anymore. I build for use. For wonder. For warmth." You nod. "And maybe for warning labels." That earns a half smile. Later, you walk with him down the cobbled road, the sky glowing with the first blush of dawn behind you. The villa shrinks into silhouette elegance, fragile, and missing one fig-holding cousin. Hephaestus adjusts the cart of tools behind him. Next time, I'm installing a wine rack that slaps people. You believe him. Because every god has a limit, even the ones who build yours. 3 days later, you find yourself knee-deep in gravel and goat droppings, watching Hephaestus sketch a perimeter fence that could reasonably hold a charging bull, a vengeful minotaur, or a very determined door-to-door philosopher, the client. A deeply paranoid goat farmer named Thalos who claims chimera sightings near his property and demands full perimeter defense against any creature with wings, claws, fire breath, or gods forbid opinions. Hephaestus accepts the challenge with unsettling enthusiasm. You sip lukewarm barley tea as he draws up plans that include motion-activated bronze spears, a siren-powered alarm system, and enchanted hinges that only open for beings without horns or scales. There's also a moat suggestion, just in case. Though the property is on a rocky hill with no natural water source. I'll build the moat last, he says, smiling like that's a normal thing to say. As the sun beats down on the dry Peloponnesian soil, you start to realize just how overqualified Hephaestus is for basic rural construction. He isn't building a fence. He's designing a defensive ecosystem. A chimera would probably take one look and decide to raid somewhere less secure like Sparta. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek farmers genuinely feared mythological creatures or simply blamed them for bad crop years. Hephaestus explains while anchoring a support beam with something that glows faintly and purrs. You glance over. Is that fence alive? Only spiritually, he replies. I added some nymph-coated empathy runes. Keeps the goats calm. As the structure rises, the farmer becomes increasingly nervous. I said secure, not cursed. Thalos insists, watching as bronze arms unfold from the gate and bow politely at passing clouds. Hephaestus reassures him. It's not cursed, it's just sentient adjacent. Still, the fence is magnificent. Woven bronze lattice with shock-absorbing rails, columns engraved with symbols of protection and patience, and a gate that plays a soft lyre melody when opened slowly. It's also enormous, soaring well above the farmhouse and surrounding sheds. A defensive marvel, possibly a UNESCO site in the making. That night, a storm rolls in, and the fence glows, not in a bad way, in a quiet, comforting, I've got you sort of way. You sit under a canopy as Hephaestus adds a lightning rod feature that channels strikes into tiny glass jars labeled emergency energy. Why jars? You ask. In case someone needs lightning later. Do people often need lightning? You'd be surprised. The next morning, Thalos emerges, blinking at the fence in awe. One goat, an anxious one named Piddle, rubs its head against the rune-engraved post and sighs with contentment. You swear it sighs. Will it hold against a chimera? Thalos asks, still skeptical. Hephaestus gestures dramatically. Against a chimera. Yes, against two chimeras stacked in a trench coat, pretending to be a tax inspector. Also yes, he even installs a weather station on the northeast corner, just because he likes symmetry with data. But it's not all smooth forging. Midway through a reinforcement check, a cluster of satyrs wanders past and begins poking the gate, trying to figure out if it dispenses wine. It does not. They leave disappointed but weirdly respectful. Was that necessary, you ask, as Hephaestus silently adds a wine scent decoy to distract future wanderers. Everything's necessary, eventually, he says. The final touch is a series of wind chimes tuned to mythic frequencies. If a chimera is nearby, the chimes play a warning. He explains, if it's a false alarm, they just sing gossip about the neighbors. You try not to laugh. Thalos looks equal parts confused and overwhelmed. Still, he nods in gratitude. This is beyond anything I imagined. Hephaestus simply pats a post. If anything breathes fire near this property, you'll hear it wheeze first. The god of the forge doesn't brag much, but he builds like someone who believes in preparing for the worst, even when the worst wears feathers and has 3 heads. Later, as you and Hephaestus rest beneath the newly forged gate, he offers you a bite of goat cheese wrapped in cooled bronze foil. It's weirdly good. You always go overboard. You tell him, I know, and you always keep going. I know, the wind chimes whisper something unintelligible in ancient Mycenaean, probably a compliment or a weather update. You drift off with your back against a fence post that's warmer than it should be, comforted by the idea that no matter how strange the world gets, someone out there is still quietly overbuilding everything just in case. You wake up to steam, not the kind from a cozy cup of tea, but the full-bodied, slightly sulfuric mist of volcanic activity. The sky is veiled in haze, the ground warm enough to toast bread, and Hephaestus is humming cheerfully as he adjusts the levers on a stone and metal contraption shaped suspiciously like a flamingo. Welcome to the break room of the gods. It's not marked on any mortal map, and it doesn't really exist in one place. The terrain shifts, sometimes cliffside, sometimes caldera, but the rules remain the same. No scrolls, no divine bickering, and absolutely no thunderbolts before breakfast. Today, it's a volcanic hot spring nestled in a crevice surrounded by black rock and fuming vents. Hephaestus gestures proudly. I built this place ages ago. Portable forge, bathhouse, and snack bar, some of my finest multi-use design work. You blink at the snack bar. It's a small shrine-like stand made of obsidian and driftwood, labeled nectar and grease. Behind the counter, a one-eyed Cyclopes in a flowery apron waves at you with tongs. Hephaestus grins. That's Bork. He makes the best grilled figs this side of the Styx. You take a cautious seat on a lava-warm stone. The steam curls around you like sleepy cats, and every now and then, the rocks emit a slow sigh. As you settle in, a satyr flops into the pool nearby, sighs dramatically, and begins filing his hooves. Been a week. He grumbles. Apollo borrowed my lyre and returned it haunted. Another figure joins this one, a dryad with moss in her curls and a scroll of building codes in hand. I'm petitioning for better leaf ventilation in sacred groves, she says. Too many pilgrims, not enough airflow. Hephaestus listens politely, sips a bubbling concoction from a steaming horn, and mutters something about cross-pantheon OSHA violations. Then he stands and walks over to what looks like a furnace with legs. With a flick of his fingers, it comes alive, arms stretching, coal eyes blinking. Workshop assistant, he explains. I call it Grit. He folds towels, makes hammers, and yells encouragement in Latin. Grit shuffles by and whispers, Fortitudo inflamma. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus invented autonomous labor tools or simply repurposed forgotten titans. Hephaestus tells you casually, personally, I think they overthink it. Sometimes a robot is just a friend with extra thumbs. While Bork grills something suspiciously sparkly, the topic turns to divine politics. A satyr snorts. Zeus banned electric lyres in Olympus again, says they interfere with cloud formation. The dryad rolls her eyes, and Hera's remodeling her temple again. Apparently, last season's marble is too emotionally transparent. Hephaestus winces. I offer to reinforce the columns. She installed curtains instead. Curtains for wind-bearing architecture. You sip your drink, which tastes like spiced thundercloud, and regret and ask, why do you come here? Hephaestus thinks for a moment, because no one demands anything. No one files divine work orders. No one expects miracles before lunch. You watch him lean back, steam swirling around his head, his limp momentarily softened by the warm stone beneath him. For a moment, he looks tired. Not in the broken way, in the please just let me be for 10 minutes way, and here, among gods and misfits, he is just Hephaestus, tinkerer, builder, occasional bathhouse architect. Do you ever regret coming down from Olympus? You ask quietly. He doesn't answer at first, just tosses a glowing coal into the spring and watches it hiss. Then, only when I remember what they called my forge, a tool shed. Ouch. You reach for a fig skewer and chew slowly. The flavor is smoky, sweet, and possibly enchanted. You don't ask. Nearby, a nymph begins reciting a love poem to a wrench. Grit claps politely. Later, when the sun has shifted and the steam thins into a pearly haze, Hephaestus stands and stretches, breaks over. He says, I've got a commission. Someone wants their house to flirt back. You blink. Come again. He grins. Aphrodite's idea. You stare. It'll be tasteful, he promises. You don't believe him for a second, but you follow anyway, because even gods need a break room. and even forge-born creators need to feel human sometimes, especially the ones who make wonders while the rest of the world forgets to notice. By late afternoon, you're somewhere in the upper cloud districts where the rainbows aren't metaphors, and the floor occasionally giggles beneath your sandals. Hephaestus, as usual, isn't walking. He's rolling on a self-propelling anvil scooter powered by mild resentment and leftover helium. Destination: Aphrodite's villa. You brace yourself. To say that the goddess of love has a style is like saying Dionysus occasionally sips. Her cloud palace is a pastel fever dream, swan-shaped lounge chairs, crystallized rose columns, and walls that change hue based on ambient flirting levels. You step onto a plush carpet that smells vaguely of warm cinnamon and seafoam. She greets you in a robe made entirely of silk laughter, sipping pomegranate nectar out of a chalice shaped like Narcissus's face. Darling, she purrs. I need a little remodel. Hephaestus, to his credit, remains neutral. What's wrong with the current design? It doesn't seduce anyone anymore, she replies, gesturing vaguely to a wall that blushes at your glance. It's just, static. She wants an open floor plan, one that flirts back. Hephaestus exhales through his nose. You want the architecture itself to initiate romance. Aphrodite beams. Precisely. When I walk into a room, I want the walls to sigh. When Ares visits, the chaise longue should rearrange itself for brooding. You don't say anything. You just look at Hephaestus and wait for the moment where he either bursts into laughter or spontaneous flame. Instead, he begins measuring. As he sketches, Aphrodite offers her thoughts. Make the foyer whisper compliments, not too eager. Though something like, "Oh, you're wearing moonlight again. Stunning." And the bath tiles should glow based on the tension in the room, not temperature. Tension, Hephaestus mutters. So, mood sensors, flirtatious ventilation, and jealous furniture. Got it. It becomes clear he's taking this project personally. Over the next few hours, he builds and retools. He conjures a chaise that hums bass lines when sat on by anyone with over 60% charm energy. He installs a mirror that fogs up with compliments like, "Your enemies envy your ankle symmetry." And the lights, they dim and brighten depending on how long eye contact is maintained between occupants. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite and Hephaestus were ever truly in love. Hephaestus mutters as he installs a rotating perfume diffuser that reacts to emotional ambient signals. I think we were just too different. She wanted art. I made architecture. Later, he programs the staircase to purr softly when ascended barefoot. Is that necessary? You ask? Yes, he says, because she'll notice. And then she'll tell Ares, and then Ares will feel weird. And that's my revenge. Petty. Sure, but oddly elegant. By nightfall, the villa has become responsive. The ceiling flutters like eyelashes. The curtains adjust themselves based on nearby cologne levels. The entire floor plan now gently encourages guests toward each other, like a polite matchmaking wind. Aphrodite twirls. It's perfect. Anything else? Hephaestus asks, exhausted. Oh, just one more thing, she says sweetly. Can you make it ignore Hera when she drops by? Hephaestus nods solemnly and mutters. Installing passive aggression protocol now. The two don't embrace. They don't really speak more than necessary. But as you leave, you catch her glancing over her shoulder, and him fiddling with a tile he's already set 4 times. You wonder what it's like to love someone who reshapes the world with fire and steel, only to leave you for war gods with jawlines and zero interior design instincts. As the villa fades behind you, glowing faintly with synchronized candlelight and the scent of powdered mischief, Hephaestus sighs. I made her a home that loves her back. He says, let's see if she notices. You don't respond. Because the wind carries a whisper, the chaise longue just moaned Ares' name in slow syllables, and Hephaestus just smiled. You're halfway up a twisting mountain trail when Hephaestus suddenly stops, squints at the sky, and says, we're almost there. Watch your step, the cabin has opinions. You assume he's joking. He is not. Nestled into a grove of twisted pines is a cabin that breathes, not literally, but close. The shutters open and close like eyelids. The door adjusts its height based on who's approaching, and the doormat whispers greetings, but only in ancient Doric. This is the workshop that built itself. It started as a prototype, Hephaestus explains, patting the stone foundation, which purrs in response. I wanted to create a forge that adapted, something that reshaped itself based on its occupant's mood, goals, or snack cravings. You blink. It does snack cravings. Hephaestus points to a sunlit alcove. That section materializes fig tarts when I'm feeling nostalgic. Don't ask why, it just does. Inside, the place is stunning and strange. Tools hover in midair, suspended by threads of thought. Blueprints bloom like flowers on the walls, shifting whenever someone gets too close. There's a furnace that hums lullabies, and a lathe that insists on singing work songs in Latin. A chair turns to face you as you enter. You sit. It approves. Hephaestus moves through the space like it's part of him. Every shelf curves to meet his hand. Every drawer knows when to open. It's a symphony of function until the SAS module activates. I gave the cabin a voice. Hephaestus says over the faint sound of cabinets judging your posture. In hindsight, I should have skipped the personality feature. The cabin clears its throat. You're tracking soot across my neural parquet. It intones, would you like a broom or shall I weep? You glance at Hephaestus. He shrugs. It's expressive. Historians still argue whether this cabin was the first sentient structure in ancient Greece or just a very dramatic collection of self-cleaning furniture. Fringe theorists claim it once beat a philosopher in an ethics debate. The philosopher now teaches pottery. Hephaestus ignores the sass and gets to work. He's crafting a new set of tools, ones that respond to gestures instead of touch. The hammer flies into his hand as he moves. The anvil repositions itself depending on the angle of his gaze. It's a forge that responds to thought. He says, you have to think in blueprints. Can anyone else use it? You ask. He pauses. Not yet. But maybe one day, if someone learns to think like a builder, not a destroyer. You take a seat by the window, careful not to insult it, and listen to the rhythmic pulse of the place. It's not noisy, just alive. The walls expand slightly when the fire flares. The rafters murmur in a tongue you don't understand but somehow feel. Do you ever get lonely here? You ask. No, Hephaestus replies, rubbing a thumb across a scar on his palm. The cabin listens. Olympus never did. You understand more than you want to admit, because in this strange, metal and stone house that reshapes itself with affection and sarcasm, Hephaestus isn't just the owner. He's the echo. He built this place to know him better than anyone else ever did, which is probably why it suddenly says, you're sad? Shall I make cocoa or trigger a rainstorm? You blink. That's oddly thoughtful. It means well. Hephaestus says, just don't let it read poetry. It starts to cry tectonically. You fall asleep in a chair that adjusts its angles every 20 minutes to support optimal spine relaxation. The cabin dims its lights, then projects a quiet illusion of constellations on the ceiling. Except one of the stars winks every few seconds. You suspect it's a built-in Easter egg. Before sleep fully claims you. Hephaestus murmurs from the corner. One day, I'll leave this place to someone who understands what it means to build for silence. To build for listening. The walls creak gently in approval, and you, drifting in the embrace of a home made from memory, metal, and mischief, feel safer than you have in years. You wake to the sound of crows arguing in Latin. The cabin has rotated itself slightly to capture more morning light, which it distributes evenly across the floor in carefully calibrated sunbeams. One patch, you notice, lands directly on your face. Intentional. Almost certainly, Hephaestus is already dressed, already packed, already mumbling into a flame that seems to be responding with Morse code. He turns to you and says, change of plans. Got a summons. You follow him out, barely dressed, blinking against the dawn. Another client. He lifts a thick envelope sealed with obsidian wax. Hades. You freeze. That Hades. No, the other one. He deadpans, then sighs. Yes, that Hades. The journey is oddly efficient. Hephaestus opens a portal using a tool that looks suspiciously like a gold-plated whisk, mutters a few lines of old underworld, and steps through. You're enveloped in cold mist and irony. The air shifts. Hephaestus has that look again, shoulders tight, jaw set, not afraid exactly, but bracing. The underworld is not a place for wanderers. It's a place for debts and favors. You step into a corridor carved from black marble, torches flickering with soul light. At the end is Hades' sitting room. It looks like a very expensive law office crossed with a mausoleum. The armchairs are velvet. The taxidermy is mostly extinct monsters. Hades greets you in full three-piece robes, sipping what appears to be lukewarm justice. Hephaestus, he says coolly. You look flammable. Hephaestus bows stiffly. You said it was urgent. Hades gestures at the far wall. My wife wants a wet bar. You blink. Surely that was a mistranslation. She thinks it would make the throne room more approachable. Hades explains, guests get nervous. She thinks drinks will help. You want a bar? Hephaestus repeats slowly. In the room where you judge souls. Hades shrugs. I'm not opposed to a popcorn machine either. Hephaestus doesn't laugh. He takes out a scroll, dimensions, preferred materials, any sacred liquids that shouldn't be mixed. The job begins. Hephaestus designs a sleek obsidian counter embedded with soul lanterns, each softly glowing with ambient remorse. The tap handles are shaped like serpents. One dispenses chilled ambrosia, the other dispenses something Hades only calls memory syrup. Behind the bar, floating shelves appear, each bottle suspended in faint gravity, labeled with phrases like regret 3812 BCE and first love. Distilled, a crystal basin fills with river water from Lethe, filtered through empathy stones. Hephaestus adds a rune lock to prevent accidental amnesia, and then comes the seating. Stools that adjust themselves based on your mood. If you're sad, they lower gently and hum. If you're overconfident, they wobble just a little. Historians still argue whether the gods used mortal emotions as design inspiration or simply harvested them like citrus. Hephaestus notes while etching a vine pattern into the counter. Personally, I like to think of pain as an accent color. Persephone arrives halfway through the install, dressed in emerald shadows and an expression of delighted danger. She samples the ambiance, sips a glowing cocktail, and beams. It's perfect. Hades frowns. There's no menu. There is now, she says, gesturing to a floating slate that writes itself. The first item, the eternal sunrise, tastes like the last time you felt seen. You sit at the corner, sipping a sample of something that makes your chest ache and your memory fog just slightly. It tastes like forgiveness. Hephaestus doesn't drink. He just polishes the final engraving and steps back. Done. Persephone claps. You're invited to the equinox party. Hephaestus nods once. I'll send a fruit tray. You leave quietly, the portal closing behind you with a whisper of cold and citrus. Back in the world of the living, the air feels too warm, too light. You glance at Hephaestus. You really installed a bar in the afterlife. I install what's needed, he says. And what was that? He doesn't answer. But the smell of Lethe lingers on his tunic. The sea air stings your face as you step onto the beaches near Troy, where history smells like wet wood, burning oil, and expensive mistakes. Hephaestus is not here for sightseeing. He's here to yell at Odysseus. Word came through the usual channels via dream pigeon that a certain Greek hero is once again attempting to outwit fate with a massive piece of poorly engineered carpentry. You crest a dune and there it is, the Trojan horse. And it's big, it's wooden, it's dramatic, but it's also crooked, hollow in the wrong places, and visibly termite infested. Hephaestus winces. This is what passes for cunning, he mutters. It's a glorified rocking chair with delusions of grandeur. You follow him as he storms toward the site where a sweaty group of soldiers is trying to wedge a wheel into place using a fishbone and some hope. Odysseus spots him immediately. Oh no, he groans. Not you. Hephaestus raises a hand. Let me help. We don't need your help. Your center beam is sagging like a solder at a philosophy lecture. We like it rustic. You're planning to hide men inside this thing. It's not decorative. It's a death trap with a handle. Odysseus folds his arms. This is a strategic marvel, a legend in the making. Hephaestus pokes the horse with a tuning rod. The entire rear axle groans. It's a miracle it hasn't collapsed under its own hubris. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus ever actually contributed to the Trojan horse. He mutters to you as he circles the structure. But I've seen enough war machines to know when one is held together with spite and chewing bark. Despite resistance, Hephaestus starts sketching upgrades, reinforced joints, fire-dampening paneling, shock-absorbent straw seats for the hidden warriors. He even offers to install a self-locking hatch, so the Trojans don't accidentally find the secret door. Odysseus flatly refuses. "This is my idea," he snaps, "and we're keeping it simple." Simple, Hephaestus echoes. "You're about to enter a fortified city inside a wooden abomination that creaks louder than Hera's wedding toast. Simple gets you caught. Or worse, splinters." He walks away, muttering about wasted potential. You find him sitting by the shore, skipping molten pebbles into the surf. One lands with a hiss and leaves a steaming hole in the tide. "Why do you even care?" you ask. Hephaestus shrugs. "Because they're about to write a myth, and it's going to be lopsided." You nod slowly. "And because they're building with desperation instead of skill." That gets a faint smile. "I hate watching people cut corners, especially fatal ones." You watch the sun slide behind the horse, casting a long, ridiculous shadow over the beach. It looks majestic from a distance. Up close, you know it wheezes like a retired centaur. Hephaestus stands, brushes sand from his tunic, and says, "Fine. Let them have their war puppet. Even if it fails, it won't fail. It'll wobble into legend, and they'll call it brilliant. No one remembers the drafts, just the damage." He gestures to the waves. "Let's go. I've got a better project waiting. One that doesn't involve pinewood drama." As you leave the beach, the wind picks up. You swear the horse groans behind you less like a war machine and more like an overworked theater prop about to miss its cue. And for the first time, you understand why Hephaestus builds things that last. Because everything else is just a stage. You find yourself in Delphi now, standing outside a cracked temple turned co-working space for oracles. There's chanting in the distance, the scent of burned time, spilt olive oil, and vague spiritual discomfort hangs in the air. A priest in a too-tight tunic offers you a flyer that reads, "Now with ergonomic seating. Ask about our back-friendly prophecy platforms." Hephaestus crumples the flyer without looking. "They're still using stone benches, aren't they?" he mutters. "Of course they are." You trail behind him through the columned atrium of the oracle compound, where initiates in gauzy robes whisper predictions about market trends and relationship regrets. The problem is obvious. No one can concentrate. There are creaky stools, uneven stone slabs, and kneeling cushions that appear to be made from dried barley. The high priestess appears, drifting like a stylish mosquito. "We were told you could improve our workflow." Hephaestus frowns. "You mean your divine insights?" "Yes," she says, gently adjusting a crystal headband. "But mostly the seating. No one can see the future with lower back pain." He doesn't laugh. Instead, he starts measuring the floor angles. You notice something odd. Nearly every oracle is slouching. Some rock back and forth. A few are stretching their spines in what might be the world's first recorded yoga. One young prophetess whispers, "I foresaw my sciatica," and dissolves into quiet tears. Hephaestus nods grimly. This is worse than Ares' war couch. Time to build. He disappears into the workshop annex. It's technically a goat shed repurposed for divine projects and emerges with an armload of bizarre parts, obsidian mesh, ambrosia-infused memory foam, and a set of bronze gears engraved with healing mantras. The first prototype looks like a throne mated with a massage chair and then studied posture philosophy in Athens. It reclines, rocks, adjusts for limb length, and emits faint lavender-scented steam. Hephaestus calls it the seat of inner alignment. The moment the first oracle sits down, she immediately starts channeling. Her eyes roll back. Her posture straightens. She whispers, "Someone's goat is in danger near Thebes." Another oracle gasps, "I've never had a vision without leg cramps before." Hephaestus adds a second model with footrests and a scroll holder that rotates based on dramatic tension. He even installs whispering armrests that remind users to hydrate and breathe evenly. Historians still argue whether ancient temples used specialized furnishings for rituals, Hephaestus says as he installs a headrest that dispenses forehead oil. But I know discomfort isn't holy, it's just sloppy design. The fringe benefit, once the seating improves, the prophecy quality skyrockets. Within hours, the oracles have predicted 2 surprise pregnancies, 1 completely avoidable sword duel, and a goat-related tax fraud. However, problems arise when some oracles refuse to leave the chairs. "This is better than Elysium," one moans. Another adds, "I think I've seen the entire future of Crete." And also, my first crush. Hephaestus is forced to install a Time's Up feature that gently lifts the seat and rolls users out like a divine conveyor belt. The high priestess is delighted. We'll be tripling our bookings, she says, scribbling something on a parchment ledger. Do you happen to do incense diffusers shaped like Athena's brows? Hephaestus doesn't answer. He's watching a young apprentice as she slowly lowers herself into the final chair, the deluxe version, fitted with an adjustable aura dome. The moment she makes contact, her breathing changes. Her eyes widen. She murmurs something about a rain of frogs in Sparta, and then immediately asks for a snack. Hephaestus smiles, just faintly. Later, as you walk past the temple steps, you spot a group of priests trying to decipher which part of the prophecy is a metaphor and which is just weather-related. Hephaestus wipes his hands and mutters, finally, furniture that sees more than the people using it. You glance back at the rows of ergonomic thrones glowing faintly in the twilight. Did you ever think, you ask, that you'd be known for chairs? Hephaestus chuckles. If I'm lucky, you fall quiet. Because maybe that's the secret, he's not chasing glory, just better posture and peace. Even if he has to weld it into the bones of a temple, Athens greets you with golden light and chaotic pigeons. Marble columns glow. Philosophers yell at statues. A man with 3 togas is arguing with a goat about property rights. You step over them. Today's job is different. Luxurious, spa-related, and already a little suspicious. A wealthy Athenian patron, Eurycles of Olive Street, has requested a premium sacred wellness installation. Translation: a private spa with divine-level features and a bathtub that can make olive oil interesting. Hephaestus mutters. He wants to sweat in salad dressing. You walk through a courtyard with vines arranged to spell his name twice. Then into a tiled bathing room big enough to host a mid-sized orchestra. Gold-plated sponges, rose petals floating in air, a harpist in the corner playing something sultry. Eurycles waves from a lounge slab. Make me something the gods would envy, he says, and not like. Subtly, Hephaestus glances at the tub. A shallow, over-polished bronze basin with mood crystals glued on with fish paste. You want this to heat olive oil. Yes, Eurycles grins. So I can soak in antioxidants and luxury. Hephaestus takes a long breath. You understand olive oil burns, right? Not if you add pomegranate juice. Eurycles replies confidently. It's in a scroll. So begins one of Hephaestus's weirdest commissions, the challenge. Build a tub that uses divine heat to warm a shallow pool of imported olive oil without flash frying the occupant. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek elites used heated oils for health or vanity. Hephaestus says, adjusting a heat diffusion rune etched with goat bone, I think it's both. With a pinch of delusion, he builds a double-walled bath using lunar marble and internal copper coils. The coils channel subtle fire energy through a rage dampener, a gem that absorbs the excess emotional heat of whoever's nearby. To regulate temperature, he installs a Cyclopean mood gauge that changes color when arrogance levels exceed the oil's burn threshold. And for circulation, Hephaestus constructs a current system that moves the oil gently around the bather, creating a soothing swirl without disrupting the floating petals or artisanal feta cubes. Won't that cook me? Eurycles asks, suddenly anxious. Only your insecurities. Hephaestus replies. The first test goes smoothly until Eurycles insists on bringing in a lyre player and 3 peacocks. One of the birds knocks over a perfume brazier. Sparks fly. Oil heats fast. Within seconds, the tub is bubbling. Eurycles screams. You scream. The lyre player drops his instrument and dives behind a fern. Hephaestus, without missing a beat, slaps his palm to the floor rune. The oil cools instantly. Steam hisses. A roasted olive rolls past your sandal like a survivor. Silence. Then Eurycles, damp and glowing, rises from the tub and gasps, I feel renewed. Hephaestus looks at you. You look at him. The peacocks blink in unison. Somehow, this is a success. Later, as you walk past the oil-soaked veranda, you hear the patron telling his guests, it's like bathing in liquid fame. I could hear my pores crying in Greek. Hephaestus says nothing, just wipes his hands, adjusts a pressure valve on the tub, and leaves a tiny plaque hidden beneath a mosaic tile. It reads, this is not a frying pan. You are not a sausage. Back on the street, you ask, "What did you learn today?" Hephaestus shrugs. "That olive oil is not a medium for wisdom. Will you ever build another oil bath? Only if it's for Poseidon," he mutters, "and I'm allowed to actually fry something." You both laugh. And behind you, the tub sighs, possibly in relief. You're back in the foothills now, where mortal builders carve houses out of stubborn stone and then argue about ceiling height for 40 years. Hephaestus has a new obsession: divine building codes. And let's just say he's not exactly here to suggest them politely. He stands before a gathering of dusty architects and sunburned masons, holding a scroll the length of a fishing boat. It's time, he declares, for a standardized approach to ladders, thresholds, and chimney-to-goat distance ratios. They stare at him like he's tried to outlaw bricks. "It's called safety," he says, "and you're all one wobbly arch away from divine embarrassment." At first, no one listens. One mason whispers, "That's the god who made a rotating temple for a minor wind nymph." Another chuckles. "He installed a giggling cupboard in a necromancer's pantry." Hephaestus narrows his eyes. "That cupboard warned people about spoiled herbs." "You're welcome." So he sets to work. He posts sample regulations all over the local quarry. Door lintels must support a Cyclops-sized burden minimum. No more than one dramatic staircase per floor. All walls must resist mild minotaur impact. Roof tiles should not dislodge during arguments. Historians still argue whether ancient builders followed divine blueprints or simply guessed until gravity intervened, he mutters while welding a balcony to a support column using sunlight and spite. But resistance builds. Local guild leaders grumble. One blacksmith begins a whisper campaign. He wants to make pillars boring. That's when the riot starts. Well, riot is a strong word. It's more like an aggressive bake sale with torches. They surround the central bathhouse, holding signs like, "Let Zeus fall through a roof like the rest of us," and "Keep the chaos in columns." Hephaestus climbs atop a half-finished pergola and bellows, "You don't understand. I'm trying to prevent your buildings from becoming cautionary myths." A tomato flies. It misses. Barely. You watch as he unfurls his counterattack, a living architectural model. A tiny self-assembling house that shifts forms based on safety protocols. When the crowd approaches it, the front door slams shut unless they're standing upright and holding their tools correctly. A small child walks up and is gently given a fig and a safety pamphlet. Silence. Someone whispers, "It's adorable," and slightly condescending. Hephaestus steps down. "Look, I know you like your buildings messy. You like saying the roof's held up by tradition. But tradition doesn't fix a crumbling beam when you're underneath it." He takes a breath. "I'm not trying to ruin your craft. I'm trying to make sure your craft doesn't ruin you." It's quiet for a long moment. Then an old mason steps forward, nods once, and mutters, "All right, let's see the chimney specs." By sunset, Hephaestus has set up a workshop under the olive trees. Builders filter in, cautiously curious. He shows them reinforced joints, safer kiln designs, and a staircase that folds into a bed for napping on site. He even designs a tool belt that doubles as a lunch carrier. Someone cries a little. Later that night, you sit beside a cooling forge, watching sparks drift upward like tiny stars. Hephaestus leans back, soot smudged and satisfied. "Did you win?" you ask. He shrugs. "I got them to stop shouting." That's a start. "You going to write all this down?" He gestures to the stars. "I already did. They just need to remember where to look." You lie back, feeling the warmth of a fire that wasn't built to destroy or dazzle, but simply to hold the night back, gently. And somewhere behind you, a self-assembling house sings lullabies about reinforced beams and proper ventilation. The sea is behind you. The cities, the temples, the olive oil mishaps. They're all fading now. Hephaestus walks ahead on a narrow path, his limp more pronounced, his forge-scarred hands shoved deep into a cloak that smells faintly of soot and cedar. He's quiet today, not brooding, just tired in a way. Only creators get tired. The kind of tired that comes after you've fixed everything you could, and most of what you couldn't. You crest the final ridge, and there it is, a house alone. Carved from a volcanic stone and cooled dreams. It doesn't sparkle or hum or flirt. It just stands, strong, silent, slightly crooked, exactly the way Hephaestus wanted it. This is where he comes when he's done trying to help everyone else. The walls are ribbed with obsidian and basalt. The roof grows moss not because it forgot to be swept, but because it chose to keep something soft. The front door opens without a sound, triggered not by spell or gear work, but something simpler. Recognition. You step inside. It's warm, lived in. Smells like metal and pine needles. There's no furniture that adjusts to mood. No ceiling that projects the constellations. Just a single wooden bench, hand-carved, uneven, beautiful. Hephaestus sets down his tools and sighs. Not dramatically, just final. I built this place with no purpose in mind. He says, no client, no goddess to impress, no myth to fulfill. He runs his hand over the wall, just stone and silence. You see traces of earlier projects here. A gear embedded in the hearth long since rusted, but kept. A hammer-shaped scorch mark by the doorway. A window pane made from repurposed shield glass. Everything meaningful, nothing explained. You ask, gently, why here? He shrugs, because it's far and quiet, and nothing needs fixing. Outside, the wind picks up. The house does not creak. Inside, Hephaestus lights a small fire with his finger. No dramatic blaze, just warmth. You sit together in silence. He doesn't talk about Aphrodite or Olympus or the times he rebuilt temples that were torn down in ceremonies he wasn't invited to. He just stares into the fire and murmurs, "Sometimes I build things just so I can watch them last longer than I do." You don't reply. There's nothing to fix here, only to feel. A final detail catches your eye. In the back corner, almost hidden, is a small anvil-shaped sculpture. It's cracked, chipped, and on the base, carved deep to the parts of me no one ever asked for. You sit with that for a long time as the fire hums and the stone walls hold, and the god who spent eternity building for others finally builds something for himself. The fire is low now, crackling softly on the hearth of that quiet little house at the edge of the world. You feel the stone walls breathe just a little deeper, just a little slower, as if even they are beginning to sleep. Outside, the stars stretch themselves thin, like ink settling into ancient parchment. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, waves brush the rocks without urgency, just rhythm, just presence. Hephaestus has gone still beside you, not asleep exactly, but folded into stillness, the kind of rest earned not by escaping work, but by having done it well. The house does not shimmer, it does not sigh. It holds, a nail stays flush against the grain, a wall stands upright, a beam bears weight it will never speak about. This is what Hephaestus understands better than anyone, that sometimes the quietest things are doing the hardest work. So you close your eyes here. In this place built from solitude and care, you breathe in heat from the embers and scent from the wood, and that strange, eternal smell of old iron and earned peace. No one asks anything of you now. No gods, no tasks, no impossible blueprints. Just rest, just stone, just warmth. And in the distance, maybe the sound of a hammer finally set down for the night.